have one screen open, and then where I can work on it while whoever's talking is also doing it at the same time. That way, if you have questions. So if you want to open a second screen, I am going to put in the chat here in just a minute. I'll put in a link to a template that you can open, and you can then do some of the stuff with me. That way you can kind of see what's going on. So I'm going to kind of move through my presentation. So why use self-checking assignments? I use them mostly because every single day in my math classroom, I was running a marathon of, Mrs. Shetler, can you check this? Mrs. Shetler, can you check my work? Can you do this? Is this right? And we have 90-minute blocks, and essentially an hour of my class was me running around just checking the same assignment for kids multiple times. So this actually has been just awesome because I was able to then target which students were not getting correct answers and which ones were struggling. And the students who were always asking for help, they were able to specifically tell me, hey, I am really stuck on this problem. So using self-checking has been a game changer for me. It doesn't cut the amount of questions, but it almost gives me more time to spend with kids who actually have actual questions in my classroom rather than just check my work. It's also nice because I don't have to post an answer key anywhere in my room, where in the past I would post an answer key and say, hey, you're kind of on your own to check it, make sure you know what you're doing. But a lot of my kids were taking the lazy route and they'd go up there after they do a few, but then they just write down the answers. So this is kind of a nice way to change that. So in general, the steps to create a self-checking assignment are to create your problems. You can use worksheets and stuff that you already have, which is very nice. So I just inputted I input problems in that I already have. You can also create your own, stuff like that. So obviously, if you want to avoid copyright issues, if you're not distributing this anywhere, then it's not going to be a problem if you use your same worksheets. But just keep that in mind. Then you're going to create your answer key within Google Sheets as well, and then using conditional formatting to color code the correct answers. And then I'm going to show you some conditional formatting to color code the incorrect answers. And then you want to hide your formatting to prevent cheating. So just as a caution, there's not an 100% way to keep kids from cheating. However, I've gotten a lot better throughout this year of making it more of a cheat-proof assignment. So, and then I'm going to show you at the end how to create a template and how to use it again later, which is also a time-saving, kind of like a hack that I have that a lot of teachers are using, is that once you've created one thing, then you can use the same thing and just change the answers and the problems, and it gives you the exact same result. So you don't have to recreate the wheel every single time. It's a huge time saver for me. Okay, so the very first thing is I'm going to put my template. Let me put that in the chat, maybe. I want that back up. Oh, there it is. Sorry, my computer at school is definitely different than my computer at home. Okay. Okay, so in the chat, you should see a template. So if you want to open that template and then open it up into a new window, that way you can kind of see the presentation, or you can just listen to me as well and flip back and forth. But I do find it easier if you have either two screens that you can look at, or if you have, if you just split your screen so you can see that. If you have trouble, let me know.
Okay, looks like you got a majority of them.
Okay, good. So when you do, you should open it and it should say make a copy. That is your personal copy. So you shouldn't have anybody else in there, which is one nice thing about Google, is when you do share that copy, then it's kind of yours. You can edit it as you want. So this is what my templates usually look like. I'll show you some other templates as well later today. So the first thing that I always do is I create the actual template, like what I want my students to see. So when we open our template, we can create a space for the title. So you always want to make sure you can adjust all of this because nothing is formatted yet. So if I were to do just a general math worksheet, I would type whatever it is here. And you can type on yours as well. And then I always give the students directions. So I usually tell them, solve each problem, make sure you type your answer in the box or in the box provided. And then I usually give them an indication of, hey, if it's right, it'll turn green. And if it's not, it'll turn red. And you can change those colors however you want. But my kids usually know green is good, red is bad. And then you would input your problems. So you can, if you want to kind of do it for whatever your subject is, you can kind of create some problems in here, or you can leave them as problem. I'm just going to do like an addition one so that it's nice and easy. So 1 + 1, and then let's do 2 + 2, and I'm just going to fill these in as I go. Some things to be aware of is that any problems or questions that you want to put here, just remember that your students need to be able to type the answers in the answer box. So you don't want to ask questions that are more of a more of an extended response. You want to make sure that it's just a one number or one word answer that you're looking at. So anyway, you would fill in all of your problems here. And then 10. So this is a 10. So I have 10 problems here. You can make this as many problems as you want. So it's kind of up to you. This is like you creating your own worksheet. How I did this is I just started merging cells together. When you just have just the self-checking portion of this, your actual space, like how you're using the space, doesn't matter. If you're doing pixel art, that's where kind of merging cells is really nice because you want all of your squares, your cells to be square. So I'll show you kind of what I mean in a little bit for that. But we're not doing pixel art in this one, but I'll show you kind of how this leads into pixel art and how you can use it with pixel art as well. Okay, so these are all of my problems. And then the students would write their answers in here. So I'm actually going to type my answers in here just so that I have them in there already, so that when we do our formatting, that everything will be good to go. 14, 16, 20. So whatever you would like to do, you just want to make sure that you know which problem you have and make sure that you know the correct answer, obviously, so that the computer can check as well. So on my Google Slides, it will tell you, make sure that you do any formatting now to make it user-friendly. And what that means is however you want it to look, make sure it looks that way now before you do formatting, because sometimes when you do your formatting, if you want to change where your cells are, it's going to mess up your formatting and you're going to have to redo it again. So just keep that in mind. So make sure that you do all of your formatting here first. Okay, so the next thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that you create a new sheet for your answer key. So opening a new sheet, for those of you that aren't sure where that is, so down at the bottom left of your screen, there's a plus sign and it says add a sheet. So right now yours already has a sheet 2 that's already built into it. That was already added, but if you click on that plus sign, it will add a sheet 3 for you, and then you can delete that as needed. And yes. Okay, so on sheet 2, this is where you can rename the sheet. I would not suggest renaming the sheet answers, because students, if they find that, will say, ooh, answers, let me click on this and find my answers. Usually I do it like puzzle, or that's usually, sometimes I leave it as sheet 2. It's just up to you. I usually pick something easy because we use it in our formulas. So in sheet 2, we're going to create a space for our problem numbers and then type them, and then we're going to make answers. So one way that I keep my students from knowing what the answers are is I don't start in A1. So I don't start in this cell up here. So in this one, I believe if you scroll down to the 200 row, yep, there they are. So if you scroll down into B200, you're going to see that I have problem number 1, 2, 3, all the way through 10. And then I have a space for my answers. So I know to type my answers in here. So I'm going to type in my answers. And I know that they just were counting by 2. So I have 2, 4, oh, not plus, sorry. 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 20. And I'm going to type in my answers here. So that's where you want to make sure that you know what your answers are, obviously, and then you're going to type them in here. And this is what Google Sheets is going to use to make sure that your answers are correct. Am I going at a good speed for everyone? Okay, good. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to now format. So in this sheet, this is really all we need. This is our basic kind of answers that we're doing. So we're going to go back to sheet 1. So at the bottom of your screen, you're going to click on sheet 1. That takes you back to your original math worksheet. And I want to start formatting. So I am going to click on the answer that I want to format. So in this first cell here, I'm going to click on that. And I'm going to click on format, conditional formatting. And I'm going to minimize that for a minute. Okay, so what you can see here is a menu on the right side of your screen opens up. Sometimes it'll ask you to add another rule, and that's what you essentially want to do. So if you don't see this right away, just click on the add another rule, which looks like this down here. It's just, this is the first time we've done it, so here it is. Okay, so when you add another rule, I used to just format right in here where it says format cells if, and I would say, oh, it's equal to whatever it equals to. Well, this is super student friendly that as soon as they figure out if you use the word format at all, they know, oh, she formatted, I wonder what that means. And they go in and they're super tech savvy and they come in, they're like, oh, it says if it's equal to this, and then they type in the right answer and it works. So a way to get around that is to actually type in a formula. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to click on the drop down box that says format cells if, and you're going to scroll all the way to the bottom, custom formula is. Okay, so now we're going to type in a formula, and this is where we kind of break out of the box and actually use what Google Sheets and Excel are actually good at, is using formulas. So the formula that we're going to type, and I'm going to put it up on my screen so you can see it nice and big here in a moment, is going to be, actually, let me just show you the formula and explain what it means, and then I'll type it in for you. So let me go to my formula real quick. My correct answers. Okay, so in here, this formula right here is what we're going to type in. You always start a formula with the equal sign. And then when you're using Google Sheets, the $sign just means don't move things around usually. So I usually put them in there. You don't necessarily have to. If you're going to copy these formulas down, you wouldn't need a $sign in there. So equals, this says whatever my answer column is in my answer row. So this part of my formula is the first chunk of my formula is just saying, okay, my answer cell, that's what it's saying. I want it to equal, this indirect means somewhere not on the sheet. So we are going to be looking at sheet 2, which is where my answers are stored. So I want my answer, which is this here, this is my answer, to equal on sheet 2, this part. So make sure, so if you want to write this formula down, or if you have, you'll get this in your little cheat sheet as well. But so we want the column and the row equal to indirect parentheses, and then you have to have the quotes, sheet 2 with no spaces because that's how sheet 2 was listed, exclamation point, and then you're going to put in the column and the row, end quotes, and then a parentheses. So within your custom formula is where it says value or formula, that's where we're going to type. So I'm going to type in equals. Oh, I'm on the wrong, here we go. On the wrong keyboard. Equals $sign. I'm looking at my answer box, which is in D, and I only want to use that top number. So if you look at this cell here, it's actually 4 and 5 together. You're only going to use the top one. So D4, so $sign 4, and I want that to equal indirect parentheses, quotation marks, sheet 2, exclamation point. And then I know, because that's where they were, that my answer was in sheet 2, but it was in C200. So if you want to make a list, sometimes I make a list on a separate piece of paper of, oh, my answer to number 1 is in C200, then it's in C201 and C202 and so on. No, and they're going to make me go back to, now that I clicked out of it. Here we go. Okay, so indirect sheet 2, $, and it was in C $200. So my answer should be in there. I need to end quotes and then parentheses. If this box that you typed your formula into is blue, that means you did everything correctly and the computer understands. If for some reason you left something out, it'll stay red and it won't let you actually do anything. So it's kind of a nice check for you as well. Okay, did I miss anything? This is a fairly simple formula. It's not the most simple, but it's fairly simple. So sometimes if I miss quotes or miss an exclamation point somewhere, it'll turn red and I have to look and see what I'm doing. Okay, so I want it to turn green. I typically pick quite a green. On my students' computers, it looks blue. So I'm going to choose a green color from the paint bucket. And then I'm going to click done. So now what happens is if I don't have an answer in there, it stays white. So if there's no answer in there, it's white. But if I type 2 in there, it's going to turn green. So then if I want to do the same thing for the next one, we do the exact same idea. So I'm going to click on my next answer box. I'm going to add another rule. In the drop down, I'm going to click and I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom, custom formula is. So now this is where I start to use copy and paste a lot, but I'll type it out for you until you can kind of see what's going on. Once you know your formulas and you know what part of your formula you need to adjust for each cell, then I usually just use copy and paste so I don't have to type everything over and over again. Okay, so equals, always start a formula with equals, and then I want my answer box. So D6 is my answer box. So equals $, D $6. And I want that to equal, it's on a different sheet, so indirect. And it quotes sheet 2, exclamation point. And that one is going to be in the next one down. So it's going to be in C201. And then I need to end my quotes out of parentheses. It's a blue box, so I know I'm good. And I'm going to change that to green as well, using my paint bucket. And then you are going to click done. So essentially you can keep doing that all the way down. Do you guys have any questions about that so far?
There is nothing in the chat.
Okay, perfect. Super. So what I'm going to do now is I'm not going to, so actually I'll show you. So everything works the exact same. I'm not going to fill in the rest of these just because that way I can show you guys how to do the incorrect one, which is a little bit more tricky just because of how things work. And I was actually on another PD last night learning how to accept answers that look like X equals something. Learning new formulas that actually will accept it with like spaces in there where you don't want them. And so this is just your most basic, but there's tons to learn. So if you are interested in this, make sure you start Googling stuff because there's tons to learn. Okay, so the next step is now to do our incorrect answers. So we're going to go back up to our D4, so our first answer. I'm going to add another rule while I'm in there. So I can already see I have my answer green rule. I'm going to add another rule to turn red. Now this one is a little bit more tricky. I'm going to show it to you first. Oops. Okay, this one here is located down here. So it starts off equals and. Whenever you have and, it means that both things have to be true for this formula to work. So it says, okay, both of these two things have to be true, and then it'll turn red when you tell it to turn red. So and just means that if you wanted one thing or another thing, you would use or instead. So the and is where we're looking. Then they tell me, okay, my answer box, so this this part here is my answer box, my column on my row again. These two symbols, so your less than and greater than symbols, if they're aligned like that, it means is not equal to. So I want my answer to not be equal to. In here, these are quotes. Now, because this is a text, it put them in here kind of strange, but in Sheets, it works really nicely. These two are quotes and they're side by side, meaning that it's not blank. So there's no space, there's nothing. So my answer is not blank, comma. So that's your first condition. Your second one is that your answer does not equal, and then this is the exact same thing that we did before. So they're saying, okay, if your answer is not blank and your answer does not equal your actual answer, then we're going to turn everything red. And so that's what we're going to use. Okay, so we're going to go back in here and I'm going to use the exact same thing. So we click on the formatting rules, you drop on the drop down, click custom formula is, and we want to type in equals and parentheses. Now our first thing was that our answer, so I have D4, and I want that to not equal a space or a blank. So I have quotes, quotes. Without a space now, make sure you put a comma. And then I want to say that I also don't want my answer, so D4 again. I don't want that to, hold on a second, let me go back. It's gonna take that out for me. Oh, I have it right here, awesome. Okay, yes, equal, so it does not equal the indirect, parentheses, quotes, sheet 2, exclamation point, which is telling it where to go. And that was in C200. End your quotes, end your parentheses. That takes care of your parentheses for the indirect, but then you also have to end your parentheses for the end. So there should be 2 parentheses. And I'm blue, which is excellent because that one usually I forget something somewhere in it, which is why I love copy and paste. And then I'm going to change that to red. So you type in your formula, and we'll do another one like this because that formula is kind of crazy. And we're going to hit done. So now we're going to check it. So I'm going to first get rid of my answer. It should stay white. Now I'm going to try it. I'm going to type in 1. We're going to see that it turns red. So I know that I've done it correct because now if I type in 2, it should turn back green. I can do the same thing for my second answer. So I'm going to go down to the second answer. I'm going to click add another rule. I want to choose custom formula is, and then I'm going to type my formula again. So I have equals, and it doesn't matter your case. It's just my preference that I like the and to be big so I know what I'm talking, where everything is. So I have and then I have my answer cell is in D6. So D6, and I want that to not equal blank. So 2 quotation marks, comma, your column for your, which is D6 again. So your answer. And you don't want that to equal indirect. Sheet 2. Make sure you include your exclamation point. And then that one would be C201. End quotes, and then 2 end parentheses. And then we have that turn red as well. Hit done. And so now for each of these, you can see I have 2 different rules. I'm going to check this one to make sure. So I'm going to get rid of my answer, make sure it stays white like I want it to. I'm going to put in a wrong answer, excellent, and then I'm going to put in the right answer. Okay, so those so far are, that's how you would format. I would then go through and you do those for every single one of these. Okay, so you're going to format those. So some formatting tips that are also included in your cheat sheet for you are to test all of your answers, both correct and incorrect. Like you saw me do that. making sure to double check. Sometimes when you move stuff around, or if you have stuff and it was working first, sometimes it means that your rule wasn't quite right. So just double check, just like the students would do. So make sure everything is working. And then before you hand it or distribute it to your students using like Google Classroom, or you can send them a link, however you're doing that, you would want to go through and erase your answers. So you would want to get rid of your 2 and your 4, make sure that the whole thing is blank so that they have to type in the answers. That way they're not already there for them. And then the other thing that we have, so one other thing that I want to show you is, let's say that my answer, obviously it's not, but let's say that my answer should have been 1/2. Let's make, so if I have 1 minus 1/2 as my third option, or my third problem, and so my answer should be 1/2. If you type in 1/2 here, you're gonna notice that you have a date that pops up. So if you are a math teacher and you want to use fractions, this is super good for fractions, except for the fact that Google changes all of your fractions that could be a date into a date, which is going to mess with your formatting, and it also messes with your students because they're like, why does it keep saying it's January 2nd or whatever it is? So what you need to do is, but if you know that you're going to have a fraction as an answer, so in the box that you're going to have a fraction, up at the top in your toolbars, there's a more formats button. It says 1, 2, 3. I can change that to what's called plain text, and it's going to read that as plain text rather than a number or an automatic, whatever it wants it to be. So I'm going to change it to plain text. And then on my answer sheet, I would want to do the same thing. So that was the third problem. I want this to be 1/2. I'm going to make sure that I change this box to plain text as well, so that it knows to read that answer as plain text. Then your formula should work correctly. Sometimes Google is nice and Excel is nice because it understands that 0.5 is the same thing as 1/2. But when you're formatting, sometimes your formatting doesn't work correctly because of that text. The other thing is that if you are a subject not math related, you are typically going to type words in here, and that is completely fine. I would just change all of your boxes here to plain text instead of the automatic that they originally start with. So I would change this box to plain text, and I could type in any word that I want. So if I was doing colors, I would say, oh, it's red. And so for those students like my daughter, who just got done, like I guess my son now got done learning colors and reading colors, that would be a really good one for him. And then if it's plain text, it'll read it as text as well. So just be careful with your formatting. Sometimes the non-numerical answers or the fractions kind of give you a little bit of problems, but usually if you Google your question, it will usually pop up with a good answer for you. Okay. Okay, so that concludes like how to format. So that's good. Do you have any questions before I move on to how to prevent cheating?
Ashton, I do have a question. Do you ever have your kids go into the revision history to see what has been changed, or at that level, you don't have to worry about that?
I have not. I have not had anybody that I know of do that. My main ones, they knew my typical computer nerdy kid, like my computer nerds who were like, ooh, I love formatting things. They got in pretty quick to just the general formatting. But I have not had anybody going to like revision history. I actually taught my students how to make pixel art as one of their projects at the end of the school year, and they all were blown away by the fact that they could even format. So it's just those high level computer people that you have to just watch. So if you're a high school teacher, I would assume you maybe get a little bit more of it. But I haven't had any in the middle school.
Okay, perfect. And I wouldn't think they would, and I would say my suggestion would be, once you get everything created, just make a copy, because then that version history wouldn't be there. So yeah, maybe some of my high school people on here, if you have those smarty pants kids, the techie ones, that's once you have everything done, you just might want to make a copy.
Yeah, and I usually, if I send students a link, I always force a copy. So if you don't know how to force a copy when you have, oh, of course I have, let me get rid of that. Oh, up on my screen. Oh, you guys can see my screen. I just can't see it. Up at the very top where it says, at the very end of the URL, it says edit. So if you're sending this to a student, if you get rid of, let me see if I can move this bar. Oh, I can. Okay. If you get rid of all of this and then type copy instead of edit and everything that follows, and copy that link, and that's the link that you send your students, it makes them make a copy. So like that's how I made you guys make a copy so that mine was not gonna get changed, my original. And so you can force a copy that way. And then when I assign these in Google Classroom, I always assign make a copy for each student, and it gives them an original every single time. So and it has their name on it, which is super nice for me because I know exactly whose it is. So that's kind of how that way they're not messing with my stuff. Anything else? I'm going to talk about hiding formatting now. And it's kind of your personal preference. If you are teaching super young kids, you're not going to have to do a lot of hiding your formatting. When you get up into the middle school and you have more kids who like to tell other kids where the answers are, then you're going to have to hide formatting a little bit more. So one thing that I do is that obviously when I'm in sheet 2, I put my answers all the way down in the 200s. So that's one way that you can hide your formatting, is to make it not an obvious place. Other teachers that I've seen who use this, so if you check for these, like if you buy a lot of like Google Sheet stuff on TPT or anything, a lot of times teachers will even hide it like way out in like the A-B range. They'll hide it way out. Okay, so making it obviously not obvious is good. The second thing that I do is on sheet 2, I can actually highlight my cells here and I can change my font to white. So now it looks like there's nothing in my cells. So even if I scroll forever and ever, I'm never going to see, oh, here's an answer. So I can change it to white, which is also very nice. It's usually the kids are like, wait, there's nothing here. And I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. And they don't understand that if you click, you actually have to click on the individual cell to see what you're actually looking at. It tells you up here, but a lot of kids don't realize that. So there, I'm going to move those there so I remember where they are. The other thing that you can do is you can hide your sheets. So if you click on the drop down beside sheet 2, you can hide your sheet. And it essentially looks like it's not there. It'll tell you that the sheet is hidden, but it doesn't tell the kids when you send it to them. And then, but if you click on this little multi-pancake area down here, if you click on that, you can then also click on sheet 2 again. So it's still there, it's just it was hidden. So if you want to keep it hidden, which is what I usually do, I just hide it and they don't even know it's there. The other option that you have is that you can protect. And I don't know a lot about protecting, but one thing I do know is that when you share it, your protections are not necessarily going to stay. You can set permissions, but for your students to be able to use this, they have to be able to edit. And if they're being able to edit, then they're just going to get a warning saying, hey, don't touch these things, but they can touch them anyway. It doesn't matter. So protecting doesn't do a ton. It just kind of gives them a warning box, which for a lot of my kids is enough deterrent anyway. So you can do that as well. So you can set your permissions here, and you can do it just for sheet 2. So usually I do it like sheet 2, set your permissions. It's going to say, well, who can do this? But as soon as you give this to somebody else, they can open it anyway. So it's not like Excel where you can lock stuff. Excel is nice because you are able to lock different cells and whoever you give it to is not going to be able to change it. But protection doesn't work like that in Google. So that's just one of the things that you can do. Another thing that a lot of teachers are doing that do a lot of Google Sheets is that they can actually hide all of this. So you can select your rows or you can select your columns. Oh, the other 2 columns. And when you right click, you can hide those columns. So they go away. So essentially your sheet now goes from A to D. They're still there, they're just hidden. So they don't actually see them. So you can use that. The other thing that you can do is you can make your rows and column widths very, very, very small so that they look essentially like they're not even there. I don't use that as much because it's inconvenient then for me to type in answers, especially on a template. But if you are having upper level students, it may be a good option for you as well. Okay, so that is kind of that's kind of what I've been doing to prevent cheating. It just makes it a little bit easier for me. One other thing before I close this one out, I'm going to show you some other ways that I've used it in my classroom as well. But before I do that is I like to create a template. So if this is the first thing that I've made that looks like this, I'm going to make sure that I make a copy first. So you would do file and make a copy. And this is already so you would do file, make a copy. You can name it whatever you want. I'm going to hit OK. And it looks exactly the same when you open it up. But what I'm going to do now is make it into a template so I can name it template. So I would just put title back here so it looks exactly like it did when I gave it to you guys. So I would put title, I would get rid of all of my problems, get rid of all of my answers. But in sheet 2, I would change all of these back to whatever they were. So I would essentially type an answer here. So I know to type an answer in and so on. However, what's really nice is once you have that template, so if all of these are gone, when I click on this and I click format and conditional formatting, my rules are still there. So I don't have to type them again. So I don't have to go through the long process of typing all of the conditional formatting in. I can just type in my new answers and my new problems and then match them on sheet 2. And I have a completely new assignment that'll work exactly the same way that this one did without doing all of the work. Okay, so now I'm going to show you some other ways that if you're kind of interested in loving Google Sheets after you do some of these, some other ways that I've used them in my classroom. So I have converted just random worksheets. So this used to be a worksheet that I had, and my students have to find the missing pieces of using circles. So they have to do diameter, circumference, and area. So essentially on the worksheet, they would be writing all of these into a grid. But now I can format all of these cells so that I know, okay, my diameter is 10. And I type it in, it turns green. If they told me my circumference is 10, it turns red. They know they need to go back and fix it. So I can do all of my same self-checking stuff here, and it worked really, really well this year. Another thing that I've done, so when I create a template, I forgot this one was on here. This is another one of my templates. I did not go back and this one I typed in before I made a copy, which is what happens. So essentially you can change how your boxes are. So instead of making them all like super narrow, I teach math. So when I get to geometry, I need a lot of images. So I just create my worksheet to have these big open, these are just images over top. So I have these big spaces for my problems. So if you're doing word problems or if you've got definitions, this might be a good option for you. And then they type their answer below it. So they would type, I think this one's 1. So they would type in their answer and it turns either red or green. If they thought this was 1, it's going to turn red. So this is just another template that I've used. I create the template and then I throw in whatever problems I want. Okay. This is probably one of my favorites that I've done is I've converted, if you're a math teacher, you've seen a lot of the math mazes where they go through and solve problems from start to finish, and they're typically on a worksheet. However, now I can do it on Google Sheets. And so I start here. And if my answer is 1, it tells me that I can take this path. So I'm using the exact same conditional formatting, but instead of green, I used teal this time just to spice it up, I guess, a little bit. And it shows the path that you're going to take. And so you're going to solve this question next. So if this is question 2, it says, oh, now I can go to this one. And it's the exact same conditional formatting. So if I were to go to conditional formatting, you're going to see, oh, I'm not in my right cell. That's why. Cancel. You're going to see the exact same 2 things. So if I were to type in a wrong answer, it turns red and it doesn't show them their path. So they have to figure out how to do that. And then a lot of you, I'm guessing, have seen the pixel art. So this is where you would want to make sure all of your cells are squares first so that you can create your pixel art over here. And then over here, these are just conditional formatting exactly the way that I showed you, except for the fact that instead of doing green for everything, I chose the colors that correspond with my picture over here. So if I keep typing, it's going to start adding in all of the different pieces. So this is 6. But now, because this is a template, I can type whatever I want in my problem section, and I can use this for whatever I want. This is a snowman skating. So I can use this for whatever topic that I get to in December or January when it is snowy. So I can use this for future then. So there's pixel art using the same idea. It's just a little bit more complicated because you have other cells attached other than just your answer. And then I don't know if you guys have seen these. These are mystery puzzle pictures. So same idea. This looks exactly like the same template I would have used earlier, but I just created kind of a puzzle aspect to it so that when I type in my answers, I no longer just get the green, but I also get puzzle pieces revealed. So this is a more advanced, this is like once you're really good at your self-checking aspect of it, then you can add fun stuff for your students to do as well. There are a huge number of things going on like this, especially if you're on Instagram following teachers at all. I follow tons of math teachers, and this cool stuff is what they're doing right now, which I find very interesting. So I did a whole series of these where I gave them like national park pictures, so they had to guess where they were. And so I just used that way they could kind of see some places outside of Ohio, and they could essentially, so they fill in, so it fills in a picture. And then the last one, it's very similar, but I've done it where it reveals a picture instead. And it's the same idea. So if you type in your correct answers, they turn green, but it's going to start revealing. So these little bubbles go away. So then F, G, H, and it starts revealing a picture. This was originally used for like a volume of pyramids. And so I actually put the Louvre, which is a pyramid, in Paris. So I put that on there for them just to give them some fun ideas, fun places to visit. They started asking, where is this? What is this? And so they liked that as well. So yeah, so that is the end. If you have any questions, I will in the chat. Let me actually put those in the chat before I forget. I have this one here, so you can kind of look at different things that I've done. Any of those links should work. And then I also have a the instruction page that I typed out as well. So if you want to print that, that's probably more printer friendly. So let me put those in the chat. Okay, so that first one there is the Google Slides presentation. So if you want that, it gives you kind of the step-by-step. And then the second one I'm putting in the chat is essentially it's a Google Doc that gives you all of the same information. There it is. I'm not sure, it just looks like maybe. And they're both forced copies, so you're not going to mess with anything if you kind of play around with them. So essentially it's just typed out so that if you want to print it for your reference, that's just essentially everything that I talked about is in there. Do you have any questions?
Well, I'm going to say thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Shelly. Could you just speak to, are you using these like daily with the work that you're having students do, or
what so last year, as you all know, it was kind of a mess. I used these daily, not necessarily always in the same format. I used a lot of Google Slides as well, just to kind of mix things up with my 7th graders, but we would typically do a mini lesson. They would be able to ask questions, do some practice together as a class, and then I would give them these as kind of their independent practice since I have them for 90 minutes each day. And then in the future, my current plan is to use these as a check for your understanding. So I'm actually revamping a lot of how I teach in my classroom next year. We're going to do a lot more, hopefully, fingers crossed, group work and investigation and stuff like that. So not your traditional classroom, but I want to give them a place where they can try things on their own and see how they're doing. So this will be perfect for that because they'll be able to try it, make sure that they're doing them correctly. And then after they've tried it, then they'll be able to go back and say, oh, this makes a lot of sense, or no, I really need help with this, that type of thing. By the end of the year, the students were a little bit tired because, I mean, they've done it every day, but I didn't have much pushback from them for doing them. I think the self-checking aspect of it was a plus.
Any other questions?
In the doc that you shared, it's saying request access.
That should fix.
I put the link to the certificate in the chat. So if anybody needs that for CEUs, I want to put a special thank you to Ashton for taking the time this summer, sharing all her resources with us. It was awesome. So thank you very much for presenting to us. Hopefully everybody got something out of it. I will stick around for a few more minutes. If you guys have any questions and you're typing them in the chat, we will wait around.
I put my email there as well. So if you're playing around with it, I am more than able to check my email and answer those questions for you.
Great, thank you.
I do a lot of my own PD over the summer, my own YouTubing over the summer. So